Live from Sin City, it's the Socks and Pinstripes podcast. And now, here's the star of the show, Diet Dr. Griffin! Teoscar Hernandez. This is Diet Dr. Griffin back with the third episode of the Socks and Pinstripes podcast. Teoscar Hernandez is an outfielder who played last season with the Seattle Mariners and recently signed a free agent deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers. His last season was mediocre. He hit .258 with 26 home runs and a decent number of runs and RBIs. 70 runs and 93 RBIs. The real story, though, was that he struggled mightily in Seattle and excelled on the road. He hit .217 in Seattle and .295 on the road. Hernandez reached free agency for the first time in this offseason, and he elected to sign a one-year, $23.5 million with the Los Angeles Dodgers. The interesting note on this contract was that $8.5 million of the salary is deferred until 2030. It is very rare that a healthy player entering his first year of free agency like this elects to sign a one-year deal. Usually these type of players want to cash in with a 4 to 5 year deal that is their best chance to maximize their value. And there's typically a reason for this, as free agency takes much longer to get to in baseball. Generally speaking, it's a minimum of 6 years, and oftentimes teams will manipulate players' status to extend that period to free agency. So very often you're seeing guys reach free agency for the first time when they're 30, 31 years old, which 31 is the age of Hernandez. So he wouldn't want to wait a couple more years to sign that long-term deal because he's less likely to get the amount of money that he's deserving. If he waits a couple more years, teams are going to start getting wary of his age and his production and not want to extend him the number of years and at the number of dollars that he wants. Now, why did he sign with the Dodgers? I think there's a very simple explanation for that. And that is the Dodgers signed both Shohei Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto to long-term deals. They also traded for and extended Rays ace Tyler Glasnow to a 5-year deal. The Dodgers have spent nearly as much money by themselves as the rest of baseball has combined. Ohtani's deal is groundbreaking. He signed a 10-year, $700 million contract in which $680 million of that contract is deferred until he's 40 years old. The contract is so crazy that the California State Controller this week went to Congress to petition limits against these kind of deferrals because Ohtani can basically move to another state or move back to Japan and skirt the California state income tax, which for this kind of a contract would be nearly $100 million in taxes. Typically speaking, the competitive balance tax rules are that the average annual value of the contract is what counts towards the CBT, not necessarily the actual money that gets paid. So Ohtani's $700 million contract would equate to counting for $70 million towards the CBT because you divide 700 million by the number of years. However, because of the significant nature of the deferrals, it lowers the present value of the contract down significantly. The math for this is a bit more complicated than I want to get into, but the gist is that the actual value that it counts towards the CBT is $46 million instead of 70. The Dodgers, meanwhile, signed Yamamoto to a 12-year, $325 million contract, and the amount of the deferral that got discounted off of the CBT basically covers what they're paying Yamamoto. Going back to Teoscar Hernandez, the $8.5 million deferral lowers the present value of the contract down to $20.5 million instead of $23.5 million. So you can see the significant impact on this, even on a short-term deal. Now, deferred money isn't anything new. Many players have deferred cash on their contracts before. Fellow Dodgers Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman have significant deferrals set up on their contracts. Francisco Lindor has deferred money when he signed his extension with the Mets, as did Rafael Devers when he signed his extension with the Red Sox last year. But nobody has ever deferred 98% of the value of their contract before. In the CBA, teams are allowed to defer an unlimited amount of money on player contracts. I think when this provision was agreed upon in the last set of CBA negotiations, I don't think anybody ever thought that somebody would just defer 98% of their salary. $68 million a year. You have to have an insane amount of discipline to be able to just pass up on $68 million a year. And Ohtani is doing it interest-free, by the way. So he's doing the Dodgers a huge solid when he doesn't have to. He can charge an interest rate onto that deferred money. So he would end up getting paid under normal circumstances more than $680 million when the deferrals hit. Mookie Betts with the Dodgers, for example, he has $115 million in deferrals and is going to get paid $120 million over the 12-year period after the conclusion of his contract. So you see that's a $5 million difference. And if you can extrapolate with Ohtani's contract, you could see that Ohtani would get an additional $30 million, approximately. There is one major reason why Ohtani can and did make this move, besides the tax implications. And that is, he makes more money off the field than every other player in the game, and in fact does so by a wide margin. Ohtani makes upwards of $50 million a year in endorsements. The next closest player comes around $5 million. Now, the common reaction from non-Dodgers fans is, this is illegal, this is terrible, and it is bad for baseball. Angry face emoji. The Dodgers are buying a championship. And I will say that yes, this is bad for baseball. And the reason it is bad for baseball is not because they are doing anything wrong. It is only because they are the only team doing this. If other teams were able to defer the levels of money that the Dodgers can, it would be a fair situation. And I think other clubs could do this, but most teams simply don't care to spend that level of money on their franchises. Spending money doesn't automatically guarantee wins. In fact, half of the teams that made the playoffs were in the upper half of the league in spending last year, and six of the teams were in the bottom half. The top three spenders in all of baseball were the New York Mets, the New York Yankees, and the San Diego Padres. None of those teams made the playoffs. The six teams that made the playoffs in the upper bracket were in the top 10 overall payrolls. The three teams that made the playoffs with the least number of dollars were the Miami Marlins, the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Baltimore Orioles, who combined payroll was approximately the same amount as the San Diego Padres spent by themselves. The Padres were number 3 on the list, by the way, at approximately $256 million. The moral of the story being that having a strong payroll does not automatically grant you access to the postseason. And with that knowledge that the owners have, a lot of them will not spend the amounts required on free agents. Even if they get creative and defer the money, many of them just simply want to run their organizations like profitable businesses and make money each year. And that is a tough pill for the fans of many teams to swallow. The next set of CBA talks won't begin until after the 2026 season. Until then, it's going to be interesting to watch and see if more teams start to exercise the same types of tactics that the Dodgers are with the deferrals on their contracts. Will a rival team get creative, or will they just cry foul and make a mess of things during the next set of talks? Gonna have to just sit back and watch what happens. I certainly expect that the Dodgers will have more players doing ring chasing with them over the next couple of years. And given that we're still more than 2 months out from the regular season, with many players still remaining out there in free agency, I'm going to hold back on making my predictions for how the Dodgers are going to perform this season. So now that I'm off of my soapbox, let's go back and talk about some of the free agent moves that happened this week. As I mentioned in the last episode of the show, Shota Imanaga was going to sign this week due to his 45-day posting window closing yesterday on the 11th. He chose the Chicago Cubs. The base value of the contract is 4 years, $53 million, but there's some complex options in there that can raise the value of that deal up to about $80 million. There were reports out that a team had offered him double what the value of the contract was. I'm assuming the $53 million over 4 section of it. If I had to guess, it was probably that team out in San Francisco, the Giants. I'm not sure how well this is going to work out for the Cubs because Imanaga is a heavy fly ball pitcher, and at times Wrigley can give up a ton of home runs if they have any semblance of wind out there. Imanaga isn't a heavy strikeout pitcher in terms of stuff. He has the ability to strike out a lot of people. He did so in Japan, but he would use a combination of off-speed pitches versus heavy speed, which is required to really be effective in the States. I kind of see a potential Shane Bieber comp, as he right now doesn't have the same levels of speed that he did when he won the Cy Young Award back in 2020, but he still has effective off speed pitches and can place them well. The money, though, with Imanaga isn't prohibitive, so I can't necessarily say it's a bad deal either in this market. The Giants' negotiating style in free agency over the past couple of years can be best described as shut up and take my money. One player who did take the money from the Giants was Jordan Hicks, who signed a 4-year, $44 million contract. And the reports are indicating that he's actually going to be a starter this year instead of a reliever, which he has been for the vast majority of his career. In 2022, Hicks started 8 games. During those 8 starts, he made it 5 innings or more once, and that was just at 5 innings on the dot. This just seems like a really, really desperate move for a team that is struggling to make anything happen in free agency. I want Jordan to be successful because I don't root against anybody, and I'm happy he got his bag, but I just can't see this working out for him as a starter. The Yankees went out and signed Marcus Stroman from the Cubs, and they got him for a 2-year, $37 million contract with an option for a 3rd year. Stroman is an effective pitcher, but he's not a heavy strikeout guy. He's also a major head case who often will tweet or say dumb stuff to the media and is not particularly well liked by fellow players. Stroman, in fact, criticized the Yankees on Twitter after the 2020 postseason. The Yankees desperately needed pitching, and reports had indicated that they had made an offer to Blake Snell, but the two sides seemed very far apart, and the Yankees just pivoted to Stroman. Cashman and manager Aaron Boone are likely out after this season if things don't shape up, so desperate times call for desperate measures. The Dodgers also made a trade with the Cubs for some minor league players. The biggest player that was in this trade was Dodgers number 2 prospect Michael Busch, who was a third baseman and is basically blocked out of positions by Max Muncy and Freddie Freeman at the major league level. So Bush could be a impact player for the Cubs at the third base position. He's a bit older for a prospect, but he is well regarded and should be able to make an immediate impact for the Cubs this year. The Dodgers needed to make this move to free up roster space on the 40-man roster, I believe, for Teoscar. And that's pretty much it for free agency moves this week. It's been kind of slow going. I had thought that once Ohtani signed and then Yamamoto signed, that the floodgates would open and we'd get a lot more free agent signing. But I have a theory going as to why that might not be the case. You see, it seems to me that there are more higher-end free agents at the moment than there are buyers, and the contracts that the players want are significantly higher than what the teams are willing to spend. This is especially true with the pitching side, as teams like the Yankees and Dodgers have pretty much already spent the money that they're going to be spending on pitching, while teams like the Red Sox and the Mets are balking at the amounts requested by the players. I think the Dodgers are out of the game in pitching, and there are other teams that have already filled their pitching needs through the lower levels. Teams like the Cardinals, Royals, Tigers have already upgraded their pitching staffs in this manner. The teams that have shown their willingness to spend are also not that desirable, as they are the Los Angeles Angels and the San Francisco Giants. The players, I think, are holding out hopes that teams like the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Mets reconsider their positions and will sign them. But I think they may have to lower their values a little bit. It's also quite possible that you get a couple of pillow contracts involved for shorter term deals to try to re-hit the market and have a better opportunity to land the long-term contract that they want. That does it for today's episode of the Sox and Pinstripes podcast. I hope you guys had a good time, and I'm looking forward to talking to you next time. Hopefully we have some free agency moves to talk about. Ta-ta!